And half the time he looks at her the way she wants him to look at her, which is like another boy. And so he'll joust with her, but then, oh, she falls down and it's, oh, she's a girl. And I think that's a good representation of how their relationship was too, is a lot of the time, Laurie filled that void that Jo needed because she wanted to have a brother instead of these sisters. But that didn't always work because he still would look at her as she was a girl part of the time. And then eventually all of the time.
That's true. And then in the book, when Jo and Laurie, they do all these pranks on people. Like,
yeah,
they do these practical jokes. I don't think that's in any adaptation that shows them more like not necessarily brother and sister, but more really like brothers.
Yeah. You know, that's what I liked about Jen Brady's book, The Subscribing to the Enemy.
Oh, yeah.
Is because it was a huge part of their relationship in
5 stars.
Her, right? Like, because it was very much like their thing together was pranking people. You're right. It's not represented in any of the movies, but Jen gets it just right in her adaptation. Like, she really nails it.
How many people would ship Jo and Laurie after that when they see them as brothers, but also how they make fun of feminine girls?
Right? Yeah. We need to write a film adaptation and make Hollywood do
it. Good idea. Yes, you will, persisted Jo. You'll get over this after a while and find some lovely, accomplished girl who will adore you and make a fine mistress for your fine house. I shouldn't. I'm homely and awkward and odd and old, and you'd be ashamed of me. And we should quarrel. We can't help it even now, you see, and I shouldn't like elegant society, and you would, and you'd hate my scribbling, and I couldn't get on without it, and we should be unhappy and wish we hadn't done it, and everything would be horrid. Anything more? Asked Laurie, finding it hard to listen patiently to this prophetic burst. Nothing more except that I don't believe I shall ever marry. I'm happy as I am and love my liberty too well to be in any hurry to give it up for any mortal man. I know better, broke in Laurie. You think so now, but there'll come a time when you will care for somebody and you'll love him tremendously and live and die for him. I know you will. It's your way, and I shall have to stand by and see it. And then, and the despairing lover cast his hat upon the ground with a gesture that would have seemed comical if his face had not been so tragical.
So this part, I feel like in the 1994 film, they use most of these lines exactly in the film. And this is why everybody falls in love with Laurie, because of the way Christian Bale performs this scene. And I remember at the time thinking how powerful it was that he's delivering this in almost like a whisper, right? But then in a lot of his other films, when he's Batman, I realized, oh, this is just the way Christian Bale acts. He just does this whisper acting. And it's kind of a little bit, for me, broken the spell of his Laurie, because I'm like, oh, Batman's going to perform it the same way.
I never thought about that, but now you said it.
Because it's how he acts. I mean, the scene is so impactful, but like once you realize that this is half of how he acts in films, I'm sure that the boom mic people who are miking him for these are like, quit whispering.
It's pretty different here. Like he's bouncing his feet, like he's angry.
He's angry, yeah.
It's not a sweet whisper to the ear. It's an angry proposal. Yeah, Laurie knows that Jo is going to fall in love. He has prophetic powers.
For sure.
I think Jo did fall in love with Fredrik in New York, but like the narrator says here, which proved that she knew nothing about love.
Because she knew she respected him. She got that. And that's what she didn't get yet, is that mature love is built primarily on a foundation of respect.
Exactly. And then in New York, Fredrik is Jo's sexual awakening, but because Jo doesn't have previous knowledge of what that is, she can't really recognize that.
Yes, I will live and die for him if he ever comes and makes me love him in spite of myself. And you must do the best you can, cried Jo, losing patience with poor Teddy. I've done my best, but you won't be reasonable, and it's selfish of you to keep teasing for what I can't give. I shall always be fond of you, very fond indeed, as a friend, but I'll never marry you, and the sooner you believe it, the better for both of us. So what a good example, too, of how wrong the 2019 film was. Because the fact that she says, I will never marry you here. I will never marry you. This is not somebody who is going to have her sister die and then it's going to make her go, maybe I'm lonely. Oh, I could have married Teddy. Like, this is somebody who knows, I don't want to marry this man.
This is why I didn't get why they were promoting 2019 film as feminist, because this is way more feminist here in the novel.
I agree.
And also, I think this scene kind of echoes this, what Jo said here earlier, where she defends Fredrik. Because now here she says that, yes, I will live and die for him if he ever comes and makes me love him in spite of myself. This bothers me in every single Little Woman adaptations, because when Laurie proposes Jo before she goes to New York, a lot of viewers think that Jo is just going to come back for him and then say yes. This actually happens after she has returned from New York. And then she has started to develop these feelings for Fredrik and even defends him when Laurie is bad-mouthing him.
Yeah, that speech was like gunpowder. Laurie looked at her a minute as if he did not know what to do with himself, then turned sharply away, saying in a desperate sort of tone, "You'll be sorry someday, Jo." "Oh, where are you going?" she cried, for his face frightened her. "To the devil," was his consoling answer. And again, this is just like what you said, the 1933 version uses that line that you'll be sorry someday, Jo, or you'll regret this, and the other versions aren't as much like that. What man are you going to feel sorry for if they're basically being like, this is the equivalent of like when men ask you out and they say, oh, you're so beautiful, you want to go to dinner, and then you say, oh, no, I'm not interested, and they say, oh, you're ugly anyway. Like, it's the same kind of red flag.
He's threatening her, going to the devil. For a minute, Jo's heart stood still as he swung himself down to the bank toward the river. But it takes much folly, sin, or misery to send a young man to a violent death, and Laurie was not one of the weak sort who are conquered by a single failure. He had no thought of melodramatic plunge, but some blind instinct led him to fling hat and a coat into his boat and row away with all his might, making better time up the river than he had done in many a race. Jo drew a long breath and unclasped her hands as she watched the poor fellow trying to outstrip the trouble which he carried in his heart. That will do him good, and he'll come home in such a tender, penitent state of mind that I shan't dare to see him, she said, adding as she went slowly home, feeling as if she had murdered some innocent thing and buried it under the leaves. I think if I would be Jo, I would be a lot less sympathetic towards Laurie.
But again, this is because she views him almost as her like child.
Yeah.
He's not her equal. He is her lesser. He's the person that she is caring for, which is also why she can't accept him, because no woman wants to marry her child.
And this is also why so many people ship Jo and Laurie, because they can see that it's a maternal feeling that she has. And I think somebody said somewhere that very often sisters become pseudo mothers for their brothers. So I think something like that is going on here. Yeah. And I think in Little Man, there's a scene where Daisy, she admires her brother a lot, like she adores Demi.
Yes.
And then she's always taking care of him. Like she brings him food, she irons his clothes and whatever. Daisy does all these things. And Daisy likes to do that. Daisy's very girly girl. She's very maternal. But then she also does that because Demi is her brother and she loves her brother. And I feel the same with Jo and Laurie sometimes.
Yeah, definitely. Now I must go and prepare Mr. Lawrence to be very kind to my poor boy. I wish he'd love Beth. Perhaps he may in time, but I begin to think I was mistaken about her.
Thank you so much for listening. A link to the full episode, I Hurt Myself If You Say No, Red Flags in Laurie's Proposal, is in the description. Take care and make good choices. Bye.